I was in the Navy, active duty 2000 to 2006, and was in the SEAL teams during that period of time. I think the biggest two things, reflecting back, that I always seem to go back to is perseverance, not taking no for an answer, putting one foot in front of the other, and not giving up. And then secondly, and I think most importantly, is, with anything in life, be it business, be it a marriage, be it any relationship you have, it's not about yourself, it's about the people around you. And surrounding yourself with people that have that same mindset and that same attitude, I think that's when really special things can happen. If you can get a group of people that care more about the group and or the interests of the group more than they care about their own self-interest. That was the biggest thing I learned in BUD/S and in the SEAL teams, and it's applicable anywhere in life. In high school here in Dallas, I got a couple of recruiting letters to play football from a few different smaller schools mostly, but got interest from the Naval Academy, and that's what really led to my initial visit to the Academy. Was the opportunity to play football up there. Visited, and I'll never forget coming back from that recruiting visit, thinking about the fact that I'd have a phenomenal education paid for. I'd have the opportunity to play football. I would have the opportunity to serve. And really at that point as an 18-year-old, you're looking at a minimum the next 10 years of your life, 12 years of your life. And I thought, there's no way I can pass up this opportunity. So that's what got me interested in the Naval Academy initially. And when I got up there and started really looking around at the opportunities once you get your commission after you graduate after 4 years. Having had a brother-in-law who went to the academy, who had some friends that were SEALs, I always knew in the back of my mind that was what I was interested in first and foremost. And it was either going to be the SEAL teams or the Marine Corps, one of the two. Having grown up here hunting and fishing and spent a lot of time outdoors, those were two that were at the top of my list as far as what I wanted to do when I graduated. I had a lot of people tell me in the midst of getting ready to get off active duty, that it would be an interesting transition. And again, I don't think people were even using the word transition. At least I wasn't back at that point. I didn't anticipate the trouble I would have leaving the SEAL teams, and I think hindsight being what it is, where I really struggled. And I would tell you that, having talked to hundreds and hundreds of other veterans with similar situations, be it the Marine Corps, the Army, or the Navy, I think the biggest things is the loss of identity, and at least for me personally, having had my dream job, and then choosing to walk away from that loss of identity. But I think most importantly, the loss of the camaraderie and having a group of guys around you that collectively you are doing a job that's got a higher sense of purpose than going and chasing a paycheck. And the loss of that camaraderie, I think, is where guys and gals get in trouble. In the midst of that transition, it's easy to isolate, and I think for me, that was something that I did, given my personality, and I think that's where guys and gals can get in trouble, is when they lose that, and they think, I thought the only alternative there was isolation, and it has been through, not only carried the load, but several other endeavors where I have found reconnection within groups, and specifically groups of like-minded individuals who served, where I've really started to turn the corner, if you will, in the midst of what was a difficult transition. In the midst of that transition and some of the issues that I was dealing with, having left the Navy, I was in the commercial real estate business at a very well-known firm, not only here in Dallas, but around the country. And I kept thinking in the context of these issues that they could be solved by making a certain amount of money. And when I was making X amount of money and realized that they weren't solving the issues I was dealing with, initially I thought, okay, then it's not X, it's got to be X plus Y. And when I hit that threshold, obviously none of those issues went away. And it was really in the midst of having a reasonably successful commercial real estate career where I was surrounded by some phenomenal people that I realized that I needed to find an outlet in order to deal with some of these issues. And the easiest way to say that, I needed to find a way to continue to serve. And for me, that was a big light bulb moment on during my transition, was finding a way to continue to serve, and that turned out to be Carry the Load. Carry the Load, myself and a co-founder, when we initially sat down to talk about it, really we wanted to do three things. Provide an opportunity for people to come out and have a meaningful Memorial Day experience. Carry the Load was born out of anger, frustration, and sadness, having lost some friends, and that weekend rolls around, and for the most part, for our generation, and again, it's because way less than 1% are serving today post 9/11 or have served, so a lot of people don't have that direct connection with military service. But that weekend rolls around and there's no reflection, there's no remembrance, there's no even discussion around what that holiday is really about. So provide people with the opportunity to have a meaningful Memorial Day experience through our events in the month of May. And at that point in time, it was specifically Memorial Day. Through those events, raising money for other nonprofits that support military, veteran, law enforcement, fire and rescue in some way, shape, or form across what we call the continuum of care. And then the third thing we wanted to do was hopefully create an event that other people would want to take the template for the event and go raise money for those constituents wherever they lived. And here we are going into our 8th year, and we've got 2 national relays that are currently underway. One that goes from Seattle to Dallas, one that goes from Boston to Dallas, 24/7, that are essentially billboards for Memorial Day and Carry the Load. And outside of those 2, we'll be in plus or minus 60 cities this year with events across the country that raise money, that help us raise money for those constituents I named before. And what started as a very informal process to select those nonprofit partners has evolved over the years, and now we've got a committee here in Dallas of about 10 folks that a large part of their job throughout the year is to look at those applications, vet those applications, do the due diligence on those groups, and this year we'll have about 25 nonprofits that are scattered across the country that are serving military, veteran, law enforcement, fire and rescue in some capacity that we will be giving money to here before the end of our calendar year in September. It's been fun to see the growth in our participants, our events across the country, and the amount of money we've been able to raise, that we've been able to give back. And the other thing that I always point out to people about Carry the Load is, you know, if you look at our 990 every year, which is in large part what charitable organizations get graded on, you know, coming out of our latest 990, I guess would be calendar year 2017 or fiscal year 17, 93% of all the money raised goes back out the door, you know, to our programs with those nonprofit partners. And you know, if you're familiar with nonprofits, anything less than 10% as far as what's being termed as administrative expenses is pretty good in my opinion. And we've been able to stay within that 7 to 12% range every year. And again, our most recent calendar year, we're at about 7% for administrative costs. So something we're very proud of. That's a testament to a very small but agile and capable staff that we have here in Dallas, of which I'm not a part of. So I think it's important I'm a volunteer. I'm technically the CEO of the organization, and I sit on the executive board, but day to day, we've got a group of people that run this 365 days a year. I didn't know it when I left the military, but I needed an outlet to continue to serve. And I would tell you that 99.999% of the conversations I've had with veterans who are in the midst of a transition, the same is true for them whether they know it or not. They are going to have to find an outlet to continue to serve, because having raised your hand and gone into the military, you've got it in your DNA to serve. And so for me personally, it was pivotal. Once we established Carry the Load, and again, I didn't know this day one, but it was evident pretty clear that we struck a nerve, not only with the 1% who've served, or less than 1%, but more importantly with the 99% that had no connection to service, but knew Memorial Day should be more than a 3-day weekend that starts the summer, or a barbecue, or a chance to go out of town. We tapped into this, what I call a sea of goodwill, and to be able to see the response from both sides, the 1% and the 99%, and to be able to raise money and continue to have a positive effect on those constituents I named earlier, that for me was, psychologically, was very, very important. Sig Sight was born out of, in the SEAL teams, we would rip apart gear and apparel, put it back together based on a variety of factors. And when I got out of the Navy, I started doing that out of necessity, adding primarily functionality at the time that I needed, wanted, that didn't exist. And again, that experience started in 2007 when I got out of the Navy. And it evolved around functionality, around specific textiles. And the light bulb moment for me with Sig Sight happened in 2013, where I looked at what I'd been doing and thought, I wonder if there's a market for not only hunting, but as we continue to grow and expand, just outdoor lifestyle in general. Premium product, made here, everything's manufactured here in the United States. And again, what started as functionality but has evolved into functionality and specific textiles. So that was how this, and never in a million years did I think I would be in the outdoor apparel and gear business. It's one of those things that happened very organically. And with a wife and 5 kids and a certain lifestyle built around a certain amount of income that I was making every year in the commercial real estate world, what I struggled a lot with at the time was, okay, if I'm going to take this enormous risk, how do I do it in a way that is at least mitigating risk where I can as it relates to the 6 other people that live with me and depend on me? And so there was a lot of soul searching. There was a lot of discussion with my wife, most importantly, who ultimately gave me the blessing to go take this risk, and a lot of discussion with a psychologist at the time, making sure that what was going on up here wasn't, I wasn't crazy. This wasn't all 100% selfish motivation. So it took me, I think the first time I told my wife about it was probably in 2014, because I tried to forget about this for a long time. I couldn't wrap my head around how to go from commercial real estate to outdoor apparel and manufacturing with zero experience, and the amount of money it would take me to get from here to there. So it was quite the process, but thankfully been able to make that transition. And your point earlier, I think we're always transitioning in some way, shape, or form. That transition never stops. And I think if that transition does stop and we get comfortable, I think that's where things can sneak up behind you, and things don't turn out well. So what I found in the midst of this journey, which has been one of the most rewarding journeys for me, but it's also been one of the most traumatic psychologically, for a variety of different reasons. But the highs have never been higher and the lows have never been lower. And I think that a lot of people, when you talk about entrepreneurship specifically, entrepreneurship is romanticized in a lot of ways. You can read a lot of magazines or books about it. And I read everything I could get my hands on for years, but I never read anything that prepared me for the perilous nature and just how traumatic it could be mentally, physically, emotionally. So, but again, I do it all over again in a heartbeat, because I think that's where it's a scary place to be at times, but it's also a lot of fun.
Candidly, I'm always a little nervous when you bring a new product or any product out here and you test it. I've tested them before, but this environment here, really, you can get any weather, you can get any temperature, you can be sliding down hills. So I'm always a little nervous about how it's going to perform and if it's going to perform the way I expect it to. And I can honestly say that everything thus far has exceeded my expectation. Very gratifying to be able to design a line and pick the textiles and the features and the functionality, and then bring it up in an environment like this and see it not only function but function extremely well. Very fresh. Over the last year, I've proven this to be a very effective pattern, and yesterday was the closest shot I've ever had on an animal. The elk that I ended up sticking with an arrow was less than 6 yards. It was coming up the mountain, essentially looking at me and didn't see me. So it's fun to know that it actually works, and works extremely well. From a product and a camo perspective, it's been a great trip. It's just having a mindset that you're going to take it one thing at a time, and you're not going to give up, and you're going to get out of it. It means we got to go that much higher, right? I think hunting is an avenue with which to get outside and enjoy it with friends and family, and the byproduct of that is being able to kill and eat an animal that you normally otherwise wouldn't. But again, I think that's secondary to being out in a place like this where not many people, whether they don't want to or whether they're not physically fit enough or whether they just haven't been exposed to it, don't get the opportunity to come up here and do this. So while hunting is the avenue, it's really about, being out here for a week and living off your back and enjoying it with good friends and having different experiences. A little paint photo. Yeah, gotta document this. To come up here and do this, and to have all the uncertainty with the weather like we did yesterday and the snow, and there's a certain amount of adrenaline that comes with uncertainty, I think. You never know what you're going to get up here, but to be able to come up here and do it, you get to push yourself a little bit. So that's a big part of coming up here and seeing if you can still hack it. At least it is for me. In this spot right here, this is my favorite spot, I think, in the world.
Long-term goals is this is going to be a lifestyle company. I made the decision to start in the performance hunting segment because that's where this idea started. That's where I spent a lot of my time. But if hunting for me is 1, fishing for me is 1A, I had to start here based on the idea and authentic, being able to market in an authentic way. But for me, this is a company built around my lifestyle, which is hunting, fishing, fitness, outdoor lifestyle in general. There's a lot of different avenues with which we can use to scale the business. But we're 3 years into it, and I tell you, we got another at least 24 months focused specifically on the performance hunting space before we can start to branch out in some of these other areas. But long term, 10 years down the road, this is an outdoor lifestyle brand. Again, that will never depart from premium product. Everything is going to be made here domestically. And what we've been able to do to date over the last 3 years, and this speaks to the capability of our manufacturing partners, everything that we sell comes with a money-back guarantee. And that covers buyer's remorse. That covers, you're hunting in this 2 years from now after you bought it and it's not as good as I told you it was going to be when I sold it to you, send it back. If you rip it falling off a mountain, send it back. We'll repair it, we'll refund it, we'll replace it. I wouldn't put my name, and more importantly, I wouldn't put Navy SEAL designed. I wouldn't market that if I didn't have guys that I serve with that are using it right now and that will speak to the quality of the gear. But long term, what's exciting for me is people think this is a hunting brand. That's where we started, but there's a lot of different ways a lot of different segments we can use to go scale the business. So that's what's exciting for me. I think there's 2 things that I always fall back on is, again, the light bulb moment for me was an experience I had in Buds during Hell Week, where you figure out in the midst of less than ideal circumstances, mentally, physically, emotionally during Hell Week, where I figured out it's not about me at this point. I need to worry about the guy next to me. And essentially military service, I don't care what branch you're in, that's what the military is about, is building cohesive teams where everyone has the interests of the group in front of their own self-interest. So 1, that has never left. And 2, coming into this, the Buds or SEAL training is the only training in the Navy, it may be in the military, but I know the Navy specifically, where officer and enlisted go through side by side. And so the traditional lines of officer and enlisted are blurred, to say the least. And so when you get to a SEAL team, when you get to a team, you're assigned to a platoon, new officer coming into a platoon. While I do have rank over 99% of that platoon, I'm dealing with guys that have vastly more experience. And what I think the biggest thing for me was balancing the rank with experience. And I attacked it as there are certain situations where rank is important, but the majority of the situations in the context of jumping into platoon and the amount of training and preparation to go overseas, as a new officer, I was going to keep my mouth shut and try and listen and absorb and learn as much as I could from everybody in the platoon who had more experience than I did. And I think that's important. Today, there are facets, when you look at carry the load, and again, when you look at our staff here with Six Sight, I don't necessarily look for industry experience. I think that is important, but more importantly, I'm going to look for people who have people that are smart, people that are capable, people, most importantly, that I can trust. And I think both with Carry the Load and with Six Sight, we've seen success because if you hire capable people that you can trust and you get out of the way, it's very easy. And again, I'm very guilty of it, of wanting to have my hand in every decision. And I think that's important at times, but if you can hire people and make sure they're very clear on the goals and objectives and get out of the way, I think that's where we've seen success with both Carry the Load and Six Sight. And I think that's it's hard for me to do. I think it's hard for other people to do as well. But I think that's the biggest thing I can take away, because it goes right back to the SEAL teams. I didn't have the experience. I had the rank. I had the ability to pull rank, but I didn't have the basis for which to back up those decisions with experience, which is most important. And there's an amount of rapport and respect and trust that takes a while to develop. But once you have that, if you've got everybody in it for the right reasons, and you're letting those people that you're either working with or working for you, or either you're working for them, if you've got everyone's best interests at heart, I think that's very, very important to any successful organization. Number one piece of advice, again, this is coming from someone who has the propensity to isolate based on my personality, but where I get into serious trouble mentally and emotionally is when I isolate myself, and where I see others with the same background get into trouble. If you want to play that out, having lost friends to suicide who have isolated and who were, for whatever reason, didn't want to raise their hand and seek help. Don't isolate. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask for help, whatever that is. And third, but I think just as important as those two, is you got to find a way to continue to serve. Again, within our DNA and within our self-worth is wrapped up in being able to serve others. And that is true in the military, and it's true on this side of it in the civilian world. You have to find something where you're putting others' interests in front of your own. And that can be your profession, that can be a nonprofit, there's a lot of different ways that can take shape. But those are the three things that I think are most important to having a transition that you can look back on, and it won't always be easy, but it will certainly be fulfilling and worthwhile.